Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a recent article from IGN that was interviewing two of the developers at Ripple Effect Studios all about Battlefield 6, and they touched on a number of interesting topics there, among them crossplay changes coming for consoles in Battlefield 6, the whole cosmetics drama that we've seen kicking up around that weird like green skin and where they plan to go with the game, PlayStation 5 Pro settings, auto spotting changes, and just a whole bunch of interesting tidbits on how they're planning to develop the game going forward. So, as always, if you guys enjoy the content here on the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything Battlefield 6, and thank you guys so much for the support. So the two people being interviewed here are Technical Director Christian Buhl and then Senior Console Combat Designer Matthew Nickerson. And as I said, they're both from Ripple Effect Studios. If you're not familiar with Ripple Effect, they created the Battlefield Portal mode for Battlefield 2042. I'm sure they've also been largely working on Portal for Battlefield 6. And before that, they worked on things like the community test environment for Battlefield 4. So they've definitely done some great work on the Battlefield series. And the title of this article is called Secretly Console First, Ripple Effect talks building Battlefield 6 and lessons learned from Battlefield 2042. So there is going to be quite an emphasis in this article on consoles, and in fact one of the first questions is, what can you tell me about the differences between performance mode and fidelity mode on PS5? And Christian here says, I think the short answer is, for performance mode, we wanted to make sure that we set the high frame rate targets for all of our platforms. We wanted to make sure that we were at least 80 frames or above most of the time, and then we just dialed down different performance settings until we were confident that we could give you that experience. And they also continue to say here that if you're playing on as low as like an Xbox Series S, you will still be able to run the game at 1080p in 60 FPS. However, if you have as good as a PS5 Pro, they say here that on fidelity mode, they run the game at 4K instead of 1440p, and then on performance mode, they run at 1620p instead of, I think, 1280p they said. Basically, you can run it at higher resolution and still hit the same quality, is the short answer. They didn't mention exactly how high the frame rate was going to go if you put it in, let's say, performance mode for PS5 Pro, but it sounds like it could at least be maybe upwards of 120. Now this next bit should be good news for those of you who are interested in console-only crossplay. So the IGN guy here says, is crossplay default on or default off when the player loads in? And Matthew says default, yes, it is indeed on. But then when he's asked, you explained it as an on-off situation, I've seen calls for console-only crossplay. Is that something you guys are considering? Is there any potential for console-only crossplay? And Matthew says console-only crossplay happens if you turn it off. When you flip that switch, then you get basically console-only crossplay, and that is, we don't fill with PC players. And then just to make sure, he asks, so PlayStation players can play with Xbox players if crossplay is off still, and Matthew confirms, yes, you can. So I know that's been something that has been widely requested by the community, is console-only crossplay. I think a lot of people just like to play against those who are using the same input method as they are. Also, people do have a bit of a hang-up about cheaters on PC, and they do also go into a little bit of detail on cheaters and say, we're not really going to be able to stop them completely, like they can't promise you that you're never ever going to run into a cheater if you do have crossplay on and you do play against PC players. But this is what Christian had to say on the matter. He says, I guess what I can say is we are taking cheating extremely seriously. Obviously, cheating is much more prevalent on PC than on console, but we are taking a lot of effort, putting a lot of work into prioritizing fighting against cheaters. We've turned on Secure Boot, we've got Javelin, our new anti-cheat system, which is required in order to play. So we're doing a lot on the PC side to clamp down on cheating as much as possible. We have a whole team within Battlefield dedicated to anti-cheat, which includes engineers, analysts who are reviewing things and banning players and figuring out what the latest cheats are. We have another whole dedicated team at EA to anti-cheat that we work closely with. That's what I can say. Now, we can never win against cheaters, right? Cheaters will always be there. It's a never-ending cat and mouse game. I can't promise that there will be zero cheaters if you're playing against PC players. That's just simply not possible, but I can say that we are being extremely aggressive. We see this as critical to the success of to the health of the game. So I think that's good news. Also good news on the crossplay front there. You know, I think people should just be able to play the game however they want. If you only want to play against people who are using controllers, then you should be free to be able to do that. I think Battlefield 6 is going to have large enough of a player base regardless that it's not really going to be much of an issue. You're going to have plenty of people to matchmake with, whether you're on PC or whether you're on console. And on the flip side, I think PC players often have this opinion as well, right? They don't want to be playing against console players who have, you know, aim assist, and they've got that new controller binding where you can spin around 180 degrees in a split second, so I think everybody wins, really. Now, this next question here is all about the map sizes in the beta, and here is the question. He says, I think there were a few specific talking points that came out of the beta that I do want to touch on. There was a lot of talk about maps being too small. Obviously, there are more maps in the launch build of the game, but I'm wondering if some of those maps that we saw, the team looked at that feedback and said, well, we're going to rearrange some of these maps. We're going to make these maps feel less cluttered, or maybe there's more cover. Is that the kind of thing you guys looked at? So Christian comes in here and he says, first of all, there was feedback. The maps were too small, and yeah, in hindsight, maybe we should have put one of the bigger maps into the beta so that we didn't get that feedback. But we've always been planning on doing bigger maps, right? We recently tested some of the bigger maps in Battlefield Labs, and here he's referring to, of course, Mirak Valley and Operation Firestorm, and there were a bunch of reasons we picked the maps we did for the open beta, including partly the maps that were furthest along and most ready to show in open beta. So I don't think we need to react to the maps aren't big enough feedback by making changes to the small maps. They're just small maps, they're different experiences, right? We do have those big maps, those big experiences. We did run them in labs over the last, I believe, 2 weekends, so we've gotten feedback on those and want to make sure that those are good for the large map experience. I do know that on all the maps, we did collect feedback on, I mean, I can't answer specific questions about specifically what we changed, but we did collect a bunch of feedback and make changes. And so, of course, a lot of the changes that they're referring to here is they changed around some of the MCOM locations, some of the things that are easily addressable and sort of pertain to key choke points in maps, especially when it comes to modes like Rush and Breakthrough. Sure, they changed some of those things, and I hope they're going to change some of the out-of-bounds areas, again, especially when it comes to Breakthrough, but have they gone and, like, made all of these smaller maps much bigger? No, they haven't, and for people who want larger maps, they're basically just going to rely on those larger maps that have not really been seen by most of you guys yet. So just know that when the game releases, don't expect massive changes to the maps you played in the beta. Okay, next one here is about server browsers, and he says one of the updates you guys had recently was that the server browser and things like that were going to be looked at in Portal. How has that gone? Is the server browser in Portal going to be ready at launch? And Christian says, I think to answer your question, generally people are saying they want server browser. We know they want it, we want to give it to them. One of the challenges is when people say I want server browser, it means different things to different people, right? So we're trying to figure out, okay, what are the best ways we can give people, most people, what they want, and is it going to be healthy for the game? I'm not a designer myself, so I can't tell you exactly where we're heading and where we're leading with this, but we will have a server browser experience. We think it's going to be something that most players are going to be happy with, so if you want, you could just click a button and jump into a game. If you want, you can go look for a specific game in a specific server. We're going to give people a lot of options. So I kind of disagree with him here when he says it means different things to different people. I don't think that it does. I think whenever somebody says, I want a server browser, what they mean is, number one, I want somebody where I can get a map rotation, where I'm not going to play the same map twice. I can get into an experience where I'm playing the map that I want and the game mode that I want. And I have a community hangout, essentially, where I can make friends with people. I can form a community or join and be part of that community. I think that's all people want from a server browser. And it sounds pretty simple to me. Now that being said, they are of course adding some sort of server browser with Portal 2.0, how that is going to be linked together with the matchmaking system, how front and center is it going to be when you log into the game, all of that stuff really remains to be seen. But I will say, I think the customized search option they have when you matchmake, that was of course tested in the beta, is very good. So if you do want to get a specific map or you want a specific game mode, that's going to be a way that you can do that. It worked in the beta some of the time, it wasn't perfect, so hopefully it's going to be somewhat improved for the launch on the 10th of October. Okay, next question here says, I do wonder if maybe you can get a bit more specific for those people who have seen Battlefield's history and have seen troubled launches here and there. What can you say to reassure console players specifically who are worried about jumping in day one? So Christian says, I could say we've been thinking about console and the console experience from the start of Battlefield 6. It has been a top-of-the-line thing. We have to build this game as if it was made primarily for console players. Obviously, we're still also thinking about PC players, but in the past, frankly, Battlefield was built as a PC game and then ported to console, and it probably felt like that. This is not how this game was built. We built this from the beginning with the idea in mind that this is going to be both on console and PC. It has to feel and play like it is a console game that was built to be a console game. And then Matthew continues here saying, we have a saying in the office in Ripple Effect when I joined the team that I created called secretly console first. It's a little moniker that kind of pokes fun. We don't want to obviously tear down or destroy any of the legacy that Battlefield has, which is first a PC game, but we really have to care about console at the end of the day. We've been putting in the reps, putting in the work. Just like Christian said, console has been at the forefront of Battlefield 6 development since day one, and really we're honed and we are well crafted in providing this product at the highest quality possible. So I think, you know, developing a game primarily with console in mind or PC in mind is always a double-edged sword. I agree with them here that making it for PC only and then porting it to console probably makes the game not feel quite as good on console, and I'm certainly biased in that regard because I play the games on PC, right? So I've never really had any of those Battlefield console experiences. In fact, I've never once played, I don't think, on a console for any length of time, so I'm probably not the best person to comment on this, but I also think they need to be careful about making it primarily for console and then secondly for PC, as it kind of sounds like they are doing here, and I think if you look at the UI in the game, that is a massive indicator of that. That whole sort of Netflix setup that they have where you select your game and you have these very large windows, it sort of looks like YouTube, right? Selecting a video. That is clearly designed for console, doesn't really lend itself very well to PC, and just doesn't display a lot of information on screen at the same time. It's not the be-all end-all, like, I can live with it, it's not going to ruin my experience of playing Battlefield 6 by any stretch of the imagination, but I still think it's something to consider. So IGN Man says, I think Battlefield 6 has had a particularly interesting rollout for a Battlefield game. Specifically, I feel like there have been a lot of leaks, big and small. I'm wondering, how does the team, how does EA feel about leaks like that? Did the team go to any lengths to try and tighten the lid? So Christian says, I could talk about that a lot actually, I could talk about that. I'll start by saying we did not want leaks, but we also knew that the most important thing was to get player feedback through Battlefield Labs, right? We had actually discussions, I think about a year or two ago, I guess it was maybe about 2 years ago, about how much we were going to do to prevent leaks versus how much we were going to do to get the game in front of players. We made a very deliberate decision that we were going to bias very heavily towards putting things in front of players and getting their feedback, even though we knew that things would leak. I remember at one point making a big presentation that said, what will leak? Everything, and he wasn't wrong, by the way. Like, we just started with that assumption that things would leak. Now, to be clear, we don't want things to leak, we weren't seeking leaks, but we knew that the most important thing was to get the game in front of players, get real feedback from players, get real telemetry, real data, and that has come at any cost, including the fact that things would leak. So that's been our approach up until now, is like, we don't want leaks, we are doing some work to make it a little bit harder for people to leak things, but our priority has been get the game in front of players, even though we know it will end up leaking. And I have to say, I really agree with that. I think a lot of people have some sort of weird conspiracy theory that DICE are purposefully leaking things out. I really don't believe that to be the case. Yes, it was positively received, and yes, it probably did build up a certain amount of hype around the game for people, but I still think they just did this organically. They knew, like he says here, things would leak, and that is, of course, exactly what happened. Just yesterday, we've seen that Battle Royale was in fact being tested, so there you go. Okay, big question here. The Call of Duty team appears to be backing away from goofy skins for this year's Black Ops 7. Do they though? Okay, I guess if he says that. It's, I feel like, all anyone can talk about, even in the Battlefield community, because you guys have conversely double down on gritty realism. How does it feel for the team to see other shooters backtracking from the goofy aesthetic while Battlefield sticks to its guns? Does it feel like this commitment to a more grounded shooter experience is paying off so far? And Christian says, I think we're really happy with where we are. We want to be a gritty, realistic shooter. Other games can and should be whatever they want to be, right? And he sort of laughs here and says, like, we're not, I don't know, Fortnite is pretty goofy, and that game is pretty good. So I think where we end up is we're pretty happy with where we are. We are a gritty, grounded, realistic shooter. That's where we intend to be, and that's what the game is going to look like for a while. So we'll come back to the ending of that sentence there, because that's worried a lot of people. Meanwhile, Matthew comes in here and he says, from the design side, we are aware of what other products are doing, but we're really focused on what works for Battlefield at the end of the day. We're not chasing trends, we're not chasing other products. I think a perfect example of the skins that we're still committed to releasing is the Road to Battlefield 6 event that's ongoing in 2042. Those are 30 premium skins that will give a player a taste of what is more to come when we talk about cosmetics in the Battlefield 6 product line. Generally, I think from a design perspective, we're doing us. We're staying in our lane, doing us at the end of the day. So all of that sounds pretty positive, I would say. We've recently seen this weird green skin, and I can't show it to you guys because it's leaked out of labs, but most of you will know what I'm talking about. It's been all over Reddit, it's been all over Twitter. It's basically a skin that was found by a data miner in the labs build, and to me, it's really not that much of a shocking skin. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it looks good. I don't think it looks like it fits the game aesthetic, but it's basically like a black skin, and then somebody's taken a can of neon green spray paint and just sort of randomly sprayed all over it. I don't know, it doesn't really look that grounded, but on the other hand, it also doesn't look cool in any way. Like, it's not a skin that I would buy. That being said, this is a data mine. This could just be some random placeholder skin that this data miner found there. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in the game, and everybody is like losing their minds about this singular skin. I think we all just need to take a little bit of a step back and not read too much into one single little data mine like that, one single little leak like that. On the other hand, I do definitely share your worries and your concerns, especially when he says that that's what the game is going to look like for a while. I want to give Christian the benefit of the doubt here, and obviously since he's not a native English speaker, maybe he just kind of said that and didn't really realize the weight that that would carry over on Reddit and other places, but I'm pretty sure he really didn't mean anything by this sentence, like, oh, we're going to start off with, you know, gritty, authentic, realistic skins, and then in a year, it's going to get wild, guys, we're going to bring out the clowns. I'm almost certain that's not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you spend all this time, commitment, effort, resources, money on getting Battlefield 6 into the great position it's currently in just to ruin it with some skins? Like, they're going to make tons of money off selling copies of the game regardless, because it's clear from the beta, so many people are interested in it. That just makes no sense to me, so I think we just need to, you know, take a deep breath, guys. Okay, next question is another interesting one. Another talking point I've seen a lot about is open and locked classes. What do you guys think about that discussion when you see so many people who want classes to have locked weapons and things like that? So Matthew answers this one. He says, it's philosophy at the end of the day. We don't really want to make a decision or really pigeonhole how you want to experience Battlefield. I know we're supporting both open and closed weapon sets in Portal and in different game modes. We ran a giant telemetry data collection test in open beta and we posted those results. I think it's ongoing and I think it'll continually evolve, but again, from a design side, we don't want to make a decision for the player base. We want to support both moving forward, and again, a key mantra for Battlefield 6 is play Battlefield how you want to. So we're making sure we support both open and closed systems, we just don't want to make the decision for the player. So I can get behind their philosophy of wanting to offer up both options, but when they say we don't want to control which option the player chooses, it really doesn't feel that way. It feels like they're leaning far more for the open weapons. They're really pushing that. We saw from the beta that those playlists were front of center, there was more of them, etc. So when they're talking about this telemetry and the data that they've collected from this so-called test in the open beta, I feel at least, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong and you don't agree with me guys, that it was massively skewed towards having open weapons rather than lock weapons. If you remember, on like the first day of, I think, the second weekend of the beta, you couldn't even see the lock weapons playlist. You had to click on the little arrow to the right. Eventually, of course, they moved it up to the left, but only after people complained. Now, David Serlin, the lead producer on Battlefield 6, has gone to X and basically debunked this myth that the data would be skewed because of that. He said that they've taken that into account when processing this data, and I don't know, I guess according to them, the data must show them that overwhelmingly people prefer open weapons, but that's not what I see when I'm reading online, so it doesn't really add up there. I just feel personally like closed weapons, lock weapons should be the default, and the open weapon system, since that is really the new kid on the block, should be where the closed weapons feel right now, right? Again, I'm not saying if you want to use open weapons, you shouldn't be able to, but it just does feel like DICE are trying to push an agenda here. They're saying, you know, we can do both, but it just doesn't feel that way, at least not to me. So next question here, auto spotting is another topic I see brought up in the community. Is that being tweaked at all? Is it going to be like it was in the beta? How are you guys looking to address that feedback, if at all? So what he's referring to here is, especially on the recon class, you could just look in the direction of somebody and it would spot them with a Dorito. So whether you could actually see the avatar of the soldier itself to shoot at was irrelevant, because you knew somebody was in the room even if it was pitch black based on this auto spotting feature. So Matthew says, I can answer that because we just talked about it and just submitted fixes and changes for it, literally just last week. So yeah, we definitely reduced the range and overall reduced the power. We found out a lot in open beta that it was obviously very strong, just like players said. Really, players ended up just shooting Doritos. Light environments, dark environments, they were just like, hey, aim at the Dorito, you're going to hit something at the end of the day. We definitely don't want that for Battlefield, so we've definitely reduced the duration, reduced the range, everything across the board to really hit that system and align it more appropriately with what we want. Again, we want the information. It's important to ping players, but it's got to be an active part of Battlefield. It can't just be a fire and forget, sweep across the whole thing and everybody's lit up. That was very apparent in the open beta, so we've made some considerable changes to the system. In terms of strength overall, we've definitely toned it down. So again, really, really good news there. I think it's fair to say that the auto-spotting was just really broken. However, I think it's also worth mentioning that, in my experience, visibility was also not that good in Battlefield 6, especially when I was playing on the Siege of Cairo map. It was hard to see people, so without that auto-spotting, or without people being spotted in general, it felt like if you'd enter a building, it was incredibly dark and very, very difficult to see somebody who was maybe camping in a corner, and likewise, once you exited the building, you were often flashbanged in the face by the bright light outside, which may be immersive, it may be realistic, but it doesn't really work that well for an FPS game where visibility is just so important. So I really hope they tweak some of that stuff as well. So as a closing question here, he says, is there anything else you want to say before launch happens about Battlefield 6, how we got here, what this game means, or what players can expect on consoles at launch? And Christian says, I guess I'll say, we said internally from the beginning that our goal was to make the best Battlefield ever. And I think we did it. The Battlefield is amazing. It's huge, the single player is awesome, the multiplayer is amazing, you've got a huge variety of maps and modes and weapons, and we built it from the beginning, as Matthew said, to be secretly console first. We made sure that this felt like a game that was built for console and not a PC game that was ported to console. So there you go, guys. A very interesting article. I didn't read out all of the questions from it, so if you want to go and take a look at the remaining ones, I will leave a link to the article down below. Let me know what you think about this. Like, what do you think about Battlefield 6? Is it going to be the best Battlefield of all time? I would say probably not. I'd still give it like a solid, maybe a 7 or a 7.5 right now. Obviously, there are huge chunks of the game that haven't been seen yet. We haven't seen all of the modes. We haven't even seen the single player, which is going to be revealed later on this month at the Tokyo Game Show. I think it's on the 19th, if memory serves, but either way, I'll be streaming that here on the channel. So maybe once we get our hands on the whole package, who knows, maybe it will be the best Battlefield game ever. But for me, there are still certain areas that are lacking, vehicles being one of the major ones. I feel like the vehicle play is just way low of the bar that Battlefield 4 set, for example, there. So I don't know, let me know down below, what score would you give Battlefield 6 based on your experiences in the beta, based on what you've seen so far. Is this the best Battlefield game ever for you? And let me know what you think about the whole cosmetics drama and, you know, the controller play and everything. Like, are people just overreacting to these things, or do they have a fair point? Just before we end the video, I also wanted to let you guys know that I've just opened up a merch shop for the channel. So some people in the past have asked me, like, Ghost, is there any way I can purchase a t-shirt or some merchandise from you? And I figured, you know what the heck, why don't I just go and open up a merch shop? And for anybody who's interested in that kind of thing or would like to support the channel and go the extra mile, there is a link down below in the description. There's a couple of t-shirts there is a couple of hoodies, and I think some caps and stuff like that as well. And for anyone who decides to buy something there, you have my eternal gratitude. But as always, guys, watching the videos, liking the videos is more than enough to earn you my gratitude. So thank you to everybody who just watched the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you're interested in Battlefield 6, and I will see you all in the next one.